The research station on Kepler Form 42b looked like a small city built near a large lake. Scientists from many different worlds lived and worked there together. They were trying to change the planet's air and water to make it safe for future colonies. The station had tall buildings, underground labs, and machines that hummed day and night. Alex Carter walked through the main hallway carrying his morning coffee. He was a water scientist from Earth who had been working at the station for 3 months. His job was to study how water moved around the planet and help design better water systems for new colonies. Alex liked his work, but what he enjoyed most were the daily visits from the Villani. The Villani looked like large cats that could walk on 2 legs and use their hands like humans. They had soft fur that changed colors from gold to brown, and their eyes were big and bright like amber stones. The adult Villani were smart and polite, but Alex's favorite visitors were the cubs. 5 young Villani cubs came to the human section almost every day. Their names were Keth, Mira, John, Lila, and Bren. They were curious about everything humans did, especially the machines Alex used to test water. The cubs would press their small faces against the glass windows and watch him work. Sometimes Alex would show them how the water testing equipment worked, and they would make excited chirping sounds. Dr. Carter called Dr. Kira Sunset, the lead Villani scientist. She walked into his lab with her usual calm manner. "The cubs are asking if they can see the big water tanks today." Alex smiled. "Of course. I was just about to check the filtration systems anyway." The cubs followed Alex and Dr. Sunset down to the lower levels where the main water treatment center was located. This area was built underground to protect the important equipment from storms. The cubs were amazed by the huge tanks and the sound of water moving through big pipes. Keth, the smallest cub, pointed at a screen showing weather information. "What does that mean, Dr. Carter?" Alex looked at the display. Dark clouds were forming over the northern mountains. "It means a storm is coming. But don't worry, this station is built to handle big storms." The other species at the station were also preparing for the weather. The Zephyrians, who looked like tall birds with 4 arms, were securing their flying vehicles. The Tritoni, who breathed water instead of air, were actually excited about the storm because they loved swimming in rough water. The Zerans, who looked like walking rocks, didn't care about water at all since it couldn't hurt them. Alex took the cubs back upstairs before the storm arrived. Through the big windows, they could see the lake getting choppy and the sky turning dark gray. Lightning flashed in the distance. "Will the storm hurt the station?" asked Mira, the only female cub in the group. "No," Alex said. "We have strong walls and barriers that keep the water out. Even if the lake rises, we'll be safe," Dr. Sunset nodded. "Our engineers designed this place to survive much worse storms than this one." But as they watched, the storm grew bigger and stronger than anyone expected. The wind began making loud howling sounds and rain started hitting the windows like small rocks. The automatic system started moving the flood barriers into place, creating walls between the station and the rising water. Commander Lisa Brooks announced over the station speakers that everyone should move to the upper levels as a safety measure. It was normal procedure, nothing to worry about. Alex helped guide the cubs and their families to the safe areas. Then something went wrong. Bright flashes of light filled the sky, but they weren't lightning. They were electromagnetic pulses that came with the storm. The lights in the station flickered and went out. Emergency power came on, but many of the computer systems stopped working. "The flood barriers are offline," reported Captain Joe Martinez from the security center. His voice sounded worried. "The automatic controls aren't responding." Alex looked out the window and saw water rushing down from the mountains much faster than normal. The storm had broken a dam upstream that nobody knew was damaged. Water was pouring toward the station like a river that had jumped out of its normal path. "Everyone to evacuation positions," Commander Brooks announced. "This is not a drill. Move to emergency stations now." The different species began moving to their assigned safe areas. The Zephyrians flew to the highest towers. The Tritoni actually moved toward the water because they could survive underwater. The Zerans walked calmly to reinforced areas where falling debris couldn't hurt them. Alex helped Dr. Sunset move the adult Villani to the upper levels. The cat-like aliens were nervous because water was dangerous for them. Their bones were too heavy to let them swim, and their fur became waterlogged easily. "Where are Keth and the other cubs?" Dr. Sunset asked suddenly. They looked around the evacuation area but couldn't find the 5 young Villani anywhere. An adult Villani named Dr. Wren came running over with panic in his voice. The cubs went back to the lower labs, he said. They wanted to check on the water tanks when the alarm started. We thought they were with you. Alex felt his stomach drop. The lower labs were exactly where the floodwater would go first. He looked out the window and saw that the lake was already much higher than normal, and more water was coming fast. The communication systems to the lower levels are down, reported Martinez. We can't contact them directly. Dr. Sunset tried to stay calm, but Alex could see fear in her amber eyes. We need to get them out of there. The water will reach the lower levels soon. Rescue teams are being organized, Commander Brooks said, but it will take time to get the right equipment. Alex watched through the security cameras that still worked. The water was rising fast around the station. Soon it would flood the underground areas where 5 scared cubs were trapped, and there might not be time for organized rescue teams with special equipment. The storm continued to rage outside, and the water kept rising. Everyone could hear it now. The sound of rushing water getting closer to the station. The cubs were somewhere in the flooded lower levels, and time was running out fast. Commander Lisa Brooks stood in the emergency control center watching multiple screens that showed the flood getting worse. Water was pouring into the lower levels of the station faster than anyone had expected. Her job was to keep everyone safe, but the situation was getting more dangerous every minute. Status report from all sections, she called out. The different species reported their positions. The Zephyrians were safe in the high towers, using their flying abilities to help spot problems from above. The Tritoni had actually moved into the floodwater and were swimming around the outside of the station, checking for structural damage. The Zerans were in the reinforced areas, completely unbothered by the chaos since water and storms couldn't hurt their rock-like bodies. But the Villani were in trouble. Dr. Sunset paced back and forth near the communications station, trying to reach the cubs. Her normally calm appearance was gone, replaced by the kind of fear that only comes when children are in danger. Still no contact with the lower lab sections, reported the communications officer. The flooding has damaged too many systems. Captain Joe Martinez pulled up building plans on his screen. The water is rising about 2 feet every 10 minutes. At this rate, the entire lower level will be underwater within an hour. Dr. Sunset made a sound that was somewhere between a whimper and a growl.
Kath and the others can't swim.
If the water reaches them before we get them out. She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Villani cubs would drown quickly in deep water. Their heavy bones and thick fur made swimming impossible for their species. What about rescue drones? Asked Dr. Wren, another Villani scientist. Martinez shook his head. The electromagnetic pulses from the storm fried most of our automated systems. The few drones we have left can't handle the strong currents down there. 2 Tritoni volunteers had already tried to swim down to the cubs. The fish-like aliens were excellent swimmers and could breathe underwater, but even they had been forced to turn back. The flood currents were too strong, and broken electrical cables in the water created dangerous areas that could kill even water-breathing species. The water is carrying too much debris, reported one of the Tritoni through a waterproof communicator. Large pieces of equipment are being pushed around like toys. It's too dangerous to navigate. Alex Carter stood quietly near the back of the emergency center, listening to all the discussions about why the rescue was impossible. Through the working security cameras, he could see the 5 cubs huddled together on top of some laboratory equipment in what used to be the main water testing facility. The water around them was getting higher, and the cubs looked cold and scared. Keth, the smallest cub, was shivering badly. Mira was trying to keep the others calm, but Alex could see that she was frightened too. John, Lila, and Bren were pressed close together, their amber eyes wide with fear. We need to wait for the water to go down, Martinez said, or until we can get better rescue equipment from the orbital station. That will take hours, Dr. Sunset said, her voice breaking. They don't have hours. Commander Brooks looked at the screens showing weather data. The storm is supposed to last another 6 hours minimum. The water won't start going down until it stops raining. Alex watched the cubs getting weaker as the cold water rose around them. He had spent months getting to know these young Villani, showing them how human technology worked, sharing stories about Earth. They trusted him, and now they were trapped while everyone else stood around talking about why they couldn't be saved. What about environmental suits? Suggested someone. Not designed for this kind of current, Martinez replied. Too bulky and slow. Underwater vehicles? All in maintenance. Won't be ready for hours. Alex quietly left the emergency center while the others continued debating options. He walked to the equipment storage area and began gathering what he needed: a waterproof flashlight, an emergency breathing device, and a coil of strong rope. He also grabbed some emergency chemical heat packs that could help warm up the cubs. When he returned to the flooded lower levels, he could hear the rushing water echoing through the corridors. The main stairs down to the lab level were completely underwater now. Through a window, he could see the cubs still clinging to their makeshift island, but the water was only a few feet below them. "Alex, where are you?" Lisa's voice came through his communicator. "We need all senior staff in the command center." Alex looked at the dark water rushing past the window. It was moving fast and carrying all kinds of dangerous debris. Any normal person would see it as impossible to navigate. But Alex had grown up swimming in rivers and lakes on Earth. He had trained as a lifeguard in college and had experience with water rescue in difficult conditions. More importantly, he knew something about humans that the alien species didn't understand. When someone needed help, especially children, humans didn't calculate odds or wait for perfect conditions. They acted. "I'm going after the cubs," Alex said into his communicator. "What?" Lisa's voice was sharp with alarm. "Alex, get back to the command center immediately." "That's a direct order." Alex was already wading into the water. It was cold and moved with tremendous force, but it wasn't impossible to handle. He had dealt with river currents before, and while this was more dangerous, the principles were the same. "Negative, Commander. Those cubs are out of time." Through the security cameras, every species in the emergency center watched as the humans simply walked into the deadly floodwater that had defeated their best rescue attempts. To them, Alex appeared to be committing suicide. But Alex knew something they didn't understand about human capabilities in water. The current immediately tried to knock him off his feet, but Alex was ready for it. He used the wall to steady himself and began working his way toward the trapped cubs, one careful step at a time. Alex moved deeper into the flooded corridor, feeling the water rise from his waist to his chest. The current was strong, but he had expected that. Growing up near the Great Lakes, he had learned to read water the way others read books. This flood was dangerous, but it followed the same rules as any other moving water. Behind him, through his communicator, he could hear the emergency center erupting in concerned voices from different species. The Zephyrians were making high-pitched calls of alarm. The Tritoni were chattering rapidly in their water language. Even the normally calm Zorans were expressing something that might have been surprise. "Alex, the current readings show forces that would crush most species." Dr. Sunset's voice came through the speaker. "How are you still moving?" Alex didn't waste energy explaining that humans were better adapted for water than most aliens realized. Instead, he focused on reading the flood patterns. The water was carrying broken furniture, laboratory equipment, and chunks of wall material, but there was a rhythm to it, spaces between the debris where a careful swimmer could move. He reached a section where the corridor turned, and the current became more violent. This was where the Tritoni had been forced to turn back. Alex could see why. The water was moving like a liquid avalanche, and electrical cables sparked dangerously overhead. But Alex also saw something the fish-like aliens had missed. The current was strongest in the center of the corridor, but along the walls there were areas where the water moved more slowly. Humans called it an eddy current, and experienced swimmers could use it to their advantage. Alex pressed himself against the wall and worked his way along it, using door frames and emergency fixtures as handholds. When a large piece of equipment came rushing toward him, he simply ducked underwater and let it pass over him. His lungs were strong enough to hold his breath for several minutes if needed. "He went under the water," someone said through the communicator. "Is he?" Alex surfaced a few seconds later and continued moving. The alien observers didn't understand that humans could hold their breath much longer than most species. What seemed like a deadly situation to them was just another challenge to navigate. The water was getting deeper now, up to his shoulders. Alex switched from walking to swimming, using a technique that let him move with the current instead of fighting against it. He angled his body to slide between obstacles and used the flood's own energy to carry him forward. "How is he doing that?" Dr. Wren asked over the communicator. The current should have swept him away by now. What the Villani scientists didn't understand was that humans had evolved as persistence hunters who could chase prey across rivers and through swamps. Human bodies were designed to handle water in ways that surprised other species. Alex's ancestors had been swimming and diving for thousands of years. Alex reached another difficult section where the corridor split in two directions. The left path led toward the main lab where the cubs were trapped, but it was completely filled with rushing water. The right path was partially blocked by debris but had some airspace at the top. Through his waterproof communicator, Alex could hear the cubs making frightened sounds. They were close now, probably just around the next corner, but getting there meant diving under the debris and swimming through a flooded section with zero visibility. "Alex, please reconsider," Commander Brooks said. "We're working on alternative rescue methods." Alex looked at his watch. The cubs had been trapped for over an hour now, and the water was still rising. Whatever alternative methods the command team was planning would take too long. "The cubs don't have time for alternatives," Alex said, and dove underwater. Swimming in the flooded corridor was like moving through a dark tunnel filled with obstacles. Alex couldn't see anything, so he navigated by touch, feeling his way along the walls and ceiling. His lungs began to burn from holding his breath, but he had trained for this kind of underwater navigation during his lifeguard certification. He surfaced in a small air pocket and took a quick breath, then dove again. The water tasted like metal and chemicals from the damaged laboratory equipment, but it wasn't toxic enough to hurt him. Human kidneys and liver were good at filtering out contaminants that would be dangerous to other species. Finally, Alex saw light ahead. The emergency lighting in the main lab was still working. He surfaced in the flooded lab and immediately heard the cubs calling to him. "Dr. Carter!" Keth's small voice was weak but excited. "You came for us." The 5 cubs were huddled on top of a large water analysis machine, about 8 feet above the current water level. But the flood was still rising, and their refuge would be underwater soon. The cubs were shivering from cold and fear, their normally fluffy fur wet and matted. "It's okay," Alex said, swimming over to them. "I'm going to get you out of here." Mira looked down at the dark water with fear. "We can't swim, Dr. Carter. If we fall in..." "You won't fall in," Alex promised. "I'm going to carry you out one at a time." But as Alex looked at the situation, he realized this would be more complicated than he had thought. Villani cubs were small but dense, with heavy bones that made them sink like rocks in water. He couldn't simply carry them while swimming. They would both drown. Alex looked around the lab for materials he could use. Most of the equipment was too heavy or too damaged to help. But then he spotted some emergency flotation devices that were designed for equipment protection, not rescue. They weren't made for living beings, but they might work if he could modify them quickly. "Stay right where you are," Alex told the cubs. "I'm going to build something to help us." The cubs watched with amazement as the human began gathering materials from around the flooded lab. To them, Alex looked like some kind of water magic creature who could move through their worst nightmare as easily as walking on dry ground. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and the water kept rising. But for the first time since the crisis began, the 5 trapped cubs had hope. Alex worked quickly in the flooded lab, gathering materials while the water continued to rise around him. The cubs watched from their perch as he collected emergency foam canisters, waterproof equipment cases, and strong cable ties that were used to secure laboratory equipment. "What are you making, Dr. Carter?" asked John, one of the older cubs. "A boat," Alex said, though what he was building looked nothing like any boat the cubs had ever seen. Alex used the foam canisters to create buoyant sections, then connected waterproof cases together with the cable ties. The result was a makeshift raft that could support the weight of the cubs without sinking. It wasn't pretty, but it would float and keep the young Villani out of the deadly water. The hardest part was getting the cubs onto the raft. Villani were naturally afraid of water, and the sound of the rushing flood made them even more nervous. Alex had to climb up to their refuge and gently convince each cub to trust him. "I know this is scary," Alex said to Keth, the smallest cub who was shaking with fear, "but I promise I won't let anything happen to you." Keth looked into Alex's eyes and seemed to find something there that calmed him. Slowly, carefully, Alex lifted the small cub and placed him on the raft. Keth gripped the sides tightly but didn't panic. One by one, Alex moved all 5 cubs to the makeshift raft. He used emergency cables to create a safety harness that would keep them attached, even if the raft flipped over. The cubs huddled together in the center, trying to stay as far from the water as possible. "Now comes the hard part," Alex said, mostly to himself. Getting back through the flooded corridors would be much more difficult with 5 passengers. The raft was bulky and hard to steer, and the cub's extra weight made everything more challenging. But Alex had studied the current patterns on his way in, and he had a plan. "Hold on tight," Alex told the cubs. "We're going to move fast, but I need you to stay calm no matter what happens." Alex began pulling the raft through the flooded lab toward the corridor. The current immediately grabbed them and tried to slam them into the walls. But Alex was ready for it. He used his body as a buffer, absorbing the impacts while keeping the raft and its precious cargo safe. In the emergency center, every screen was focused on the rescue attempt. The alien species watched in amazement as Alex navigated obstacles that had defeated their best rescue equipment. Dr. Sunset was pressed against the monitor, her amber eyes tracking every movement. "How is he controlling the direction?" asked one of the Tritoni. "The current should be pushing them randomly." What the fish-like aliens didn't understand was that Alex wasn't fighting the current. He was using it. By reading the water flow and positioning himself correctly, he could guide the raft along paths that other species would never see. The most dangerous moment came when they reached the section with the electrical hazards. Sparking cables hung into the water, creating deadly zones that could kill anyone who touched them. Alex had to navigate between them while managing the unwieldy raft and protecting 5 terrified cubs. "Dr. Carter," Mira whispered. "The sparks are getting closer." Alex could see that the cubs were close to panic. If they started moving around or tried to jump off the raft, they would all drown. He needed to keep them calm while navigating the electrical maze. "Look at me," Alex said firmly but gently. "Don't watch the sparks. Just look at my face and listen to my voice." The cubs focused on Alex while he carefully maneuvered between the dangerous cables. Sometimes he had to duck underwater and push the raft from below, holding his breath while the cubs stayed dry above the surface. Other times he had to use his body to push away floating debris that threatened to damage their makeshift boat. "Tell me about your favorite games," Alex said, trying to distract the cubs from the danger around them. As they moved through the hazardous area, the cubs began talking about the games they played in the Villani section of the station. Their voices helped Alex stay focused on his navigation while giving the young aliens something to think about besides their fear. "We like to play Hunt the Light," said Lila. "It's where we chase reflected sunbeams with our paws." "That sounds fun," Alex said, pushing the raft around a particularly dangerous electrical hazard. "Maybe you can teach it to me when we get out of here." Finally, they cleared the electrical section and entered the main corridor that led back to the upper levels. The current was still strong, but there were fewer obstacles here. Alex could see the emergency stairs in the distance, though they were still underwater. "Are we almost safe?" asked Bren, the quietest of the cubs. "Almost," Alex said. "Just a little bit farther." But as they approached the stairs, Alex realized they had one more problem. The stairway was flooded, but there was an air pocket at the top where the emergency teams were waiting. Getting the raft up those underwater stairs would require Alex to dive down and push from below, while the cubs rode above. "I need you all to hold on very tight now," Alex told the cubs. "This is the last hard part, and then we'll be safe." Alex took a deep breath and dove under the raft. In the dark water, he felt for the stair railings and began pushing the makeshift boat upward. His lungs burned from holding his breath, but he could hear the cubs calling encouragement from above. When he finally surfaced at the top of the stairs, emergency teams from multiple species were waiting to help. Dr. Sunset rushed forward with tears in her amber eyes as the cubs were lifted to safety. "You did it," she said to Alex. "You actually did it." Alex sat on the stairs, exhausted and breathing hard. Water dripped from his clothes and hair, but all 5 cubs were safe and unharmed. Around him, the alien rescue teams looked at him with expressions he had never seen before, something between amazement and respect. The medical bay buzzed with activity as doctors from different species checked on the rescued cubs. The young Villani were wrapped in warm blankets, their fur slowly drying and returning to its normal golden color. They were cold and tired, but otherwise unhurt, thanks to Alex's quick thinking and careful rescue. Alex sat on a medical bed while a Tritoni doctor checked him for injuries. The fish-like physician was amazed that Alex had no serious damage despite swimming through conditions that would have killed most other species. "Your species has remarkable resilience," the doctor said, running scanners over Alex's arms and legs. "The water pressure alone should have caused internal damage, but you show no signs of trauma." Alex shrugged. "Humans are tougher than we look, I guess." What Alex didn't mention was that the rescue had been dangerous even for him. His muscles ached from fighting the current. His lungs burned from holding his breath so many times, and he had cuts and bruises from the debris. But he was alive, and more importantly, so were the cubs. Dr. Sunset approached with all 5 cubs following close behind her. They looked much better now that they were warm and dry, though they stayed close to the adults after their frightening experience. "Dr. Carter," Keth said in his small voice, "thank you for saving us." The other cubs echoed his words, their amber eyes bright with gratitude. Alex smiled and knelt down to their level. "You're very welcome," he said. "I'm just glad you're all safe." "How did you swim through that water?" asked Mira. "It looked so scary and dangerous." Alex thought about how to explain it in terms the cubs could understand. "Humans have been swimming for a very long time. Our bodies are good at moving through water, and we're not afraid of it like some other species." Dr. Sunset looked at Alex with an expression of deep respect. "What you did today was extraordinary. In all of Villani history, we have never seen such courage from another species." Word of the rescue spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Within hours, the story had reached the orbital platforms and was being transmitted to other star systems. Each species that heard about it reacted with amazement. The Zephyrians, who dominated the air but feared water, were stunned that any being would voluntarily enter a flood. Their council sent a formal message of respect to the human diplomatic corps. The Tritoni, despite being water breathers themselves, were impressed by Alex's navigation skills in such dangerous currents. Their rescue specialists requested detailed reports on human swimming capabilities. The logical Zirans struggled to understand the risk versus reward calculation that led Alex to attempt the rescue. To their mathematical minds, the odds of success had been too low to justify the attempt. Yet somehow the human had succeeded. But it was Dr. Sunset's report to the Villani Council that had the most impact. She wrote about more than just the rescue itself. She described how Alex had acted without hesitation, without asking for permission or calculating odds. When cubs were in danger, the human had simply done what needed to be done. "This species possesses qualities we have not encountered before," she wrote. "They combine physical capability with moral compulsion in ways that seem impossible. The human risked his life for our young without any expectation of reward or recognition. This suggests that humans as a species have an instinctive drive to protect others, especially children, that overrides their own survival instincts." The report was shared with other species councils and academic institutions. Scientists who studied behavior and evolution were fascinated by the implications. Here was evidence that humans had evolved not just physical adaptations for survival, but psychological ones that prioritized the welfare of others. Within weeks, human colonies throughout the galaxy began receiving unusual requests. Species that had never shown much interest in human capabilities suddenly wanted to know more about emergency response and rescue operations. A Zephyrian colony requested human advisors for their water safety programs. A Tritoni research station asked for human consultants to help design rescue equipment for air-breathing species. Even the logical Zirans inquired about human decision-making processes during crisis situations. Alex continued his work at the research station, but now he had a constant companion. Young Keth had appointed himself as Alex's assistant, declaring that he wanted to learn everything about human water science. The other cubs also visited regularly, no longer afraid of the human who had carried them to safety. "Dr. Carter," Keth said one day while watching Alex test water samples, "will you teach me to swim like humans do?" Alex smiled. "Villani bodies aren't built for swimming, Keth, but I can teach you about water safety and how to help others who might be in trouble." The cub's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes, I want to help others like you helped us." As months passed, the other 4 cubs also began showing interest in rescue and emergency response work. They studied human techniques for helping others in dangerous situations, adapting the concepts to their own species' capabilities. The flood at Kepler 442b had lasted only 6 hours, but its effects rippled through galactic civilization in ways no one had expected. The image of a human walking into deadly water to save alien children became a symbol of what humanity could offer to the larger galactic community. Other species began to see humans differently. They were no longer just another spacefaring race with decent technology. They were the species that would risk everything to help others. the ones who saw a problem and acted to solve it regardless of the personal cost. Alex never thought of himself as a hero. To him, the rescue had been a simple choice. Children were in danger and he had the ability to help. But to the rest of the galaxy, Alex Carter had shown them something profound about human nature. Years later, when the 5 cubs had grown into adults and become leaders in their fields, they would tell their own cubs about the day a human walked into a flood to save them. The story would become part of Villani culture, a reminder that courage and compassion could come from the most unexpected places. And somewhere in the galaxy, whenever someone was in trouble and help seemed impossible, others would remember the human who didn't hesitate when cubs needed saving.